When should I switch to terrorized zones to maximize my experience while leveling? Are there certain area tiers of low monster density worth avoiding? If you pondered the answer to these questions, stay a while and listen as I discuss the calculations behind when to switch, a brief area comparison, and the essential fundamentals behind experience penalties towards the end. So Sanctuary, when should you consider switching? 94. That is my personal answer and when I believe most players should consider the switch to doing permanent terrorized zones. Now, there is a little bit of subjective nuance with this answer, as there are probably some players who believe that you can start a little bit sooner, and we will showcase some of that in the data, but my personal assessment diving in was that 94 is the perfect inflection point when you consider the shift. But what we did also find is that there is absolutely a maximum stopgap at level 95, where you want to make sure that you are no longer farming your basic 85 areas due to the severity of the experience penalty. Now, before we jump into some of the data to help validate why I selected 94, let's take a look at some of the top experience areas to farm when terrorized. While there are many great terrorized tier list zone resources in the wild, the one up behind me on screen is one of my personal favorites from Maxroll, as it did a thorough 360 review with a focus on experience, and they emphasized a variety of other variables in their weighted decisions, and they even took this a step further by color coding this based off of the elemental frameworks of characters to demonstrate kill speed efficiency in these different zones, and if you interact with the element, it is also very intuitive and dynamic, only displaying those that you want to possibly focus on. Now, I will have this resource linked below for those that want to check it out, and I certainly encourage you to do so. And one of the things that we're about to show in the data is that regardless of these tiering zones, there is absolutely a certain point where it is advantageous and perpetually beneficial for you to always focus on these regardless of your perception of that zone. Now for a little housekeeping and framework setting in terms of the rationale for how we got there, what resources we used, and the comparisons that you're going to see ahead. One of the primary resources leveraged was Maxroll's experience calculator, which provided a consistent framework for running my scenarios. To simplify the analysis, I evaluated a single monster type, in this case a mega demon, the Venom Lord, who is found in Chaos Sanctuary. You will see a side-by-side framework showcasing non-terrorized monster A versus terrorized monster B. The key objective was to determine how many kills would be required to achieve the next character level, and you will see those values in blue. The important focus will be on the percent gap or differential, green being good, dark orange being bad. This was all calculated for Hell, base character level 90 to 95, Players 1, Party 1 with no Annie, Experience Shrines, or Ondals equipped. So what you're looking at in this first grid is a character comparison at 90 to 95 and comparing again two monster types, monster A representing a white Venom Lord in a non-terrorized situation, who of course is a base static level of monster level 85, versus a terrorized white Venom Lord, which is a character level +2 monster level modifier. So again, in the first row of level 90, that would make the Venom Lord monster level 92. The blue values represent the number of individual kills of this monster type in order to level up to 91. So the way to read this in that row again is that in a non-terrorized situation, you'd have to slay 36,000 Venom Lords to get to 91, or in the case of them being terrorized, only 25,000. So that's where the gap percent starts to come in, green being positive. That is, you have to kill 36% less Venom Lords in order to level. Now, the key here to watch is as you start to accelerate up into levels, you start to see this gap start to accelerate, which is ultimately why I chose 94. Now, you may be wondering what happens to elites such as champions and uniques, and now we're going to pull those grids in, and you can see a very similar trend that once you get to 94 up to 95, that is really when you start to see it accelerate. And this is ultimately why I chose 94. You could again look to start doing these sooner from an experience perspective, but you have to remember that the monsters gain in damage, and they're a little bit harder to slay, and they're also a little bit more dangerous to your character, which is why I suggest waiting to 94 again if you are trying to make the push to 99. An even easier way to actually look at this analysis is in a bar chart. So what you're actually looking at here is the same number one chart you saw previously, where the red line represents the number of Venom Lords you have to slay in a non-terrorized situation, whereas the green flat line there represents the Venom Lord kills when terrorized. But what the blue bar chart is actually the differential, or the total difference between those kills. It's a little bit easier to see from a percentage perspective, and you can start to see that at 92 and 93, the blue charts are starting to show, but they're not really a huge gap. But once you hit 94 going up from 93, you really start to see and visualize that acceleration. And then you really get to 95. And that is the stop gap that I referenced earlier in this video, that by this point, you should absolutely stop everything you're doing from a non-terrorized situation and really start to focus on this, because you can see how massive the benefit is because of the experience penalty. Now, hold up. Before you go blasting me in the comments saying, but Theory, you compared Chaos Sanctuary to Chaos Sanctuary. That's an S tier terrorized zone. What about a crap terror zone like Bloodmoor and Den of Evil? Well, I anticipated that type of concern, and so I went ahead and did that exact same analysis, comparing a baseline Venom Lord in Chaos Sanctuary to a Fallen in Bloodmoor and Den of Evil when terrorized. Let's take a look. So now pulling in all these charts together again, looking at white champions and uniques, we're comparing again a baseline Venom Lord in Chaos Sanctuary to a Fallen terrorized in Bloodmoor and Den of Evil. Now, as you look across these grids, you can start to see that at least even in the white Fallen in terrorized situation, you absolutely don't want to be doing those at character level 90-91, because it would not be worth your time. You actually need to kill more of those monster types, and the Venom Lord in a standard Chaos run would be more advantageous. But again, as you start to get to 94, you can start to see the massive acceleration. And this, of course, compensates for champions and uniques specifically. And you can see that even in these two instances, 94 is really your target sweet spot. The only call out here, if we really want to get technicals, yes, at character level 94 down at the bottom, it is a little bit more of a break-even situation. Assuming every single monster was unique, which we know isn't the case, you wouldn't necessarily get a massive experience boost and benefit from the Fallen, but you still get the point that you start to see that normalization and growth at 94 and beyond. Now, looking at the same situation from a chart perspective, similar to the Venom Lord versus Venom Lord, this chart just does a better visual representation. And as you can once again see here, in a white versus white situation, once you get to character level 94, and you're starting to focus on the Fallen, you can start to see that graph accelerate, especially into 95. Really looking at that last comparison is kind of crazy, that even an F tier low density area like Bloodmoor and Den of Evil is still going to be advantageous for you at level 94 and beyond, which is ultimately why I chose that. And to put a finer point in that, again, if your character level 95, that makes a Fallen level 96, a white Fallen that is, versus a standard 85 Venom Lord. You would have to kill 16 Venom Lords in Chaos Sanctuary non-terrorized to equal one single Fallen terrorized. And in the same comparison, if you think about slaying Diablo, who's monster level 94 in a non-terrorized situation, it would take 42 Fallen to equal the same XP, which you would get in a full clear of a terrorized Bloodmoor and Den of Evil. So it really kind of puts it into a different perspective, that while it may be boring to do and you may want to ignore it at first when you see that pop up on your terrorized zone list, you might want to actually think twice about that, especially if your objective is to push for 99 and the experience grind. Now, at the end of the day, if you think about acquiring a Sunder Charm or targeting loot, obviously that's a very different framework and perspective. I certainly encourage you to go get those Sunders much earlier on. And for those that have seen my Magic Find videos, you know that I suggest getting to character level 91, because at that point, across all monster types in the game, including bosses, you can double dip and maximize your treasure class 87 plus framework. So if that's your objective and prerogative, certainly don't worry about going to 94 and beyond. But for those that want the 99 push, 94 is your target.